For a look at the national papers today, we're joined by Dr. Liam Lenten, a sports economist from La Trobe University. Thanks for being with us today.
Good morning, Melissa. Good morning, Paul.
Morning, Liam.
And Andrew Wilkie has really dominated the newspapers this week, and he's still on some front pages again today.
Certainly, this is an ongoing story, and the screenshot we've got today is from the Sydney Morning Herald, but this story, as you specified, did get a reasonable run all around the country. Pokies reform is back in the headlines, as it has been, albeit intermittently, for a number of months now. And yeah, it turns out that mandatory pre-commitment is still the hot topic of debate, and obviously there's a very politically charged issue. There are two camps out there, and the issue is whether mandatory pre-commitment will indeed work or not.
And it certainly is a contested issue, and it seems that Andrew Wilkie is struggling to get the traction now. He's lost that crucial one-vote margin that he used to have in Parliament. How do you think it's going to pan out? Can you just gaze into a crystal ball for us? Well,
obviously he's got a lot less power, and his power will diminish over time as the time horizon approaches the next election anyway. And there is a lot of speculation out there that after the next election, presuming either of the two major parties gets a clear majority, that any power that he's managed to build up in arguing for this will all of a sudden be wiped away from him.
One thing he has done, though, is he's used his position to get lots of people talking about it. It's one of those issues, isn't it, this week, that it's hasn't just been the politics that people are talking about, but also the policy and the issues involved.
Certainly, and it's refreshing in a way, Paul. I think that that this is a research question that should be a priority for national bodies that fund research. And I'm almost flabbergasted that in my particular field of endeavour, economics, that there isn't a lot of evidence to try and actually answer this question. And of course the detractors of mandatory pre-commitment have focused on this. There's no evidence to support that this would work, and that's something that you always see in their sound grabs. But then again, there's no evidence to suggest it wouldn't work either, and therein lies the problem. So really there should be a lot more effort by particularly those in the field of experimental economics. This is a field where you try and get people in the lab and test their decision making under certain conditions to answer these sorts of economic phenomena.
Yeah, it's hard when you just leave it to the Productivity Commission. But the economics, of course, is back in the headlines too, with the latest World Bank report out.
Yes, almost on cue, Melissa. This really follows this pattern of good news, bad news, right? So yesterday, the Australian share market hit a fresh 5-week high, and yeah, almost on cue again. Like I said before, out comes this world report, and this time says the World Bank, Australia may not be spared.
It's quite a worrying report that the World Bank is saying that with a reduction of economic growth forecasts, which is what it's putting out, that it may in fact be worse than what we saw in 2008, which must certainly be concerning for countries like Australia and many others.
Is the World Bank's role to make those worst case scenario declarations?
No, they don't go for worst case. They try to avoid the extremes, and
which means we need to.
Which means it certainly could be worse. Yeah, and the IMF has downgraded growth forecasts in recent times as well. So that's certainly what's predicted, but it might throw up some policy questions for the Australian government.
Certainly, and a lot of the commentary is focusing on that this might be worse, not merely because of the conditions leading up to it, but just because this time that there's little policy room to move for a lot of global governments. For Australia, the policy implications are a bit more mixed. Owing to a couple of interest rate increases in 2010, the RBA once again has a little bit of room to move on lowering interest rates, and we can see quite a few in the crystal ball coming this year. But the fiscal policy outlook is not so rosy. The federal government doesn't really have the scope to just roll out wave after wave of new spending like they did in 2009.
Now, this next story I really like. Greg Page coming back to the Wiggles, because there's some number crunching to be had in this story as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what those numbers would tell us, Paul. But yeah, certainly I thought this would be a nice, light-hearted story. This appeared on the front page of both the Telegraph and also the Herald Sun in Melbourne. So yes, the yellow wiggle, Greg Page, returns after a 5-year hiatus with illness, and some of the commentary in the newspapers today have just focused on that very aspect of it, but others have also looked at more what's happened to the replacement yellow wiggle, Sam Moran, and it kind of reminds me of the funny economics of the entertainment industry. I mean, we've seen this sort of thing occur before with mega bands such as Kiss and Duran Duran, that after a wave of successive personnel changes, that they've decided to get the original lineup back together again. Yeah. And it always seems that the replacements are squeezed out in this very manner. And those of your viewers who actually follow Bon Jovi will know that they've got a very distinct kind of business model, that John treats the rest of the bands very much like employees rather than band members.
Right. Well, there's also plenty of sport in the papers, but we'll leave that one with our sport reporter, Dr. Liam Lenten. Thanks for joining us to look through the papers this morning.
Many thanks again.
And we will head straight to